Okay, a very good afternoon, everybody. Today, semester four students are going to make a presentation on introduction to Julian Barnes's novel, The Only Story. Julian Barnes is quite known for memory novels, and also he is known for very inventive and intellectual novels. So his novels are rather philosophical. It doesn't give us a kind of a juicy story as we have studied in either Chetan Bhagat or even in Amitav Ghosh. We find a very interesting storyline. But in case of Julian Barnes, we have a rather intellectual novel, a rather philosophical novel where there are lots of philosophical ramblings. Things doesn't happen much outside. Things keeps on happening inside the minds and the memories of the character, and that makes it a very difficult reading also. I don't know how many of you might have read the original novel. It's not a very long novel, but still it is very difficult also. So if you want to challenge yourself that are you mature enough after studying literature for 5 long years, UG and PG? What capacity you have developed to read intellectual novels or rather philosophical novels? Then you can try to read this, and if you are able to complete it and you come out from this novel with some kinds of gains and understanding, well, you can say that, well, you have now qualified to read a high quality intellectual literature also. His famous other works were like History of the World in 10 and a half chapters. So in 1989, he has written this, and this also is critically well acclaimed work. His another equally important work is it's on Flaubert's Parrot, and that also is very well received by all the critics. He's one of the novels won Booker Prize also, and that was the novel written before this novel. That was The Sense of an Ending. In our discussion of this novel, we time and again go back to The Sense of an Ending, a Booker Prize winning novel by Julian Barnes. And without that, this reading of this novel remains incomplete also. Like in case of Amitav Ghosh, some understanding of The Hungry Tide, the novel which was written almost 20 years back, is important because many of the characters are also coming directly from The Hungry Tide in the Gun Island. The same way here, there is a philosophical connection. There is a connection of memory narrative with the sense of an ending. So that way, both the texts are connected with each other also. The only story is the 13th novel by Julian Barnes. For quite a long time, is writing novels, a rather short novel as we have marked it. It's a narrative by the main lead protagonist, Paul Roberts, who is our protagonist, who is telling the story. By and large, it deals with the idea about Paul's agonized memory. This memory is not a happy memory, but an agonized memory. His first love when he was very young, almost young adult at that time, fallen in love with a rather old woman, and how it became a kind of a sore for him. That is the story. So interestingly, we see that normally when people talk about their first love, they are very euphoric. They are so happy. The memory of the first love is a happy memory. But in this case, in Julian Barnes's vision of life, it is not so. It is rather a tragic memory. The style of the book also is very difficult. It is not a conventional narrative. The chapterization also is quite awkward, like it is divided in three parts, which is only known as 1, 2, and 3 only. The part 1 is this boy meets a woman. It's not a man meets a woman or a boy meets a girl, but here it is a boy meets a woman. So a young boy and a rather old woman. It is first part is told in first person. Then second part is a mixture of first and second person narrative. and it is the decline of the love affair. And the third part is the rest of Paul's life, the old Paul now. And that part is told with a mixture of second and third person in the narrative also. In the last few pages, as Paul says his final goodbye to Susan, which also happened decades ago, when the story is being told to us, now seated in a psychiatric hospital, he reverts to the first person. But when we see this, the ending, another thing, the beginning of the novel is also very interesting. Before I invite the presenters to introduce the text, if we read the opening lines of this novel, the only story, if we read this, it has a very interesting beginning. We have seen several times that some novels have a very interesting beginning. Many times we refer to Jane Austen's novel, The Pride and Prejudice, has a very quotable lines. We also refer to Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, which also has a very attractive opening paragraph. This novel also has a very interesting opening paragraph and opening lines. The first page itself sets the tone of intellectual novel, the tone of philosophical narrative that gets set here also. So let us read some part, and then we invite the people to the group of students to come and share the things here. So the novel begins. Would you rather love the more and suffer the more? Would you rather love the more and suffer the more, or love the less and suffer the less? That is, I think, finally, the real question. Existentialists used to use these kinds of framing of the sentence, that what is the real question? Like they said, the suicide is the real question. The same way here, would you rather love the more and suffer the more, or love the less and suffer the less? I think finally that is the only real question. You may point out, I read the novel, you may point out correctly that it isn't a real question, but we don't have the choice. If we had the choice, then there would be a question, but we don't, so there isn't any question. Who can control how much they love? If you can control it, then it isn't love. I don't know what you call it instead of love, but it isn't love. Most of us have only one story to tell. Is coming to the title. Most of us have only one story to tell. I don't mean the only one thing happens to us in our lives. There are countless events which we turn into countless stories. But there is only one that matters. Only one finally worth telling, and this is mine. Now, who is this? We still don't know. But as we know something about the text, so we say it is Paul Roberts who is telling us. Otherwise, it takes time in understanding who is this person. Is a male or a female, or a kind of a eunuch that we have seen in case of Anjum. Who is telling this story? We don't know. That this is mine story. But then he says, before starting a story, he says, but there's the first problem. If this is your only story, then it's the one you have most often told and retold, even if, as is the case here, mainly to yourself. If this is a very important story of your life, you might have told this story so many times to yourself only, not to other people, but yourself. You might have told it and retold it on several occasions. We are getting something very interesting about retellings here. In post-colonial literature, you have discussed about retellings. Here we are getting some idea to read retellings. So he says you have retold the story to yourself. The question then is, do all these retellings bring you closer to the truth, or what happened, or move you farther away? I am not sure. One test might be whether, as the years pass, you come out better from your own story or worse. So, when you keep on retelling the stories, what is happening? Let us have one test. And the test is that, are you coming out of that story in a better way, or in a worst manner? Are you becoming happy after retelling the story, or are you becoming unhappy after telling the story? To come out worse, then he says in this test, if you come out worse, might indicate that you are being more truthful. If you come out unhappily out of that retelling of the story, you are more truthful. On the other hand, there is the danger of being retrospectively anti heroic, making yourself out to have behaved worse than you actually did can be a form of self praise. So I shall have to be careful. He says, I am again retelling the same story. Now I am telling to you people. I am writing that. And I have to be very careful. Well, I have learned to become careful. I have learned to become careful over the years. As careful now as I was careless then, as careful now as I was careless then. Or do I mean carefree? Can a word have two opposites? On one side, careful, the opposite, can it be careless or carefree? And then he says the time, the place, social milieu of the story. He says, well, love stories doesn't matter where they are. Time, place, social milieu doesn't matter in love story, but still let me tell something that it happened 50 years ago in southern part of London. And it all started in a club, and that was a tennis club. It all started in a tennis club. And there he says, accidentally, the tennis club. Who would have thought it might begin there? Growing up, I regarded the place as merely an outdoor branch of the younger conservatives. I owned a racket, a tennis racket. I used to have one racket and had played a bit also, just as I could bowl a few useful overs of off spin. So he was a cricketer also, and he was playing off spin. He was a spinner, bowler. I could bowl a few useful overs of off spin and turn out as a goalkeeper. So maybe he was also playing a soccer or a football also, where he says, I also used to be a goalkeeper in that game. I was competitive at sport without being unduly talented. Without being unduly talented, I was just competitive as a pastime. I used to play some of these games also. And then there was one tournament in this tennis club, and by chance he happened to be in a draw. Luck by chance, everything happened. And in a mixed doubles match, there was a rather old lady who became his partner. Susan MacLeod became her partner, and that was the beginning of this very awkward love story of around 18, 19 years of young Paul with a rather old lady who is in 40s, Suzanne MacLeod, because they became a partner in a tennis match, in a mixed doubles tennis match. So this is how he begins his story. He is thinking. There's lots of reflection in this story that we see there. So now let us invite the students to give us an introduction to this entire novel. It's one by one. You can start coming and present yourself.
Hello everyone, I am Kavita Chauhan and my co-presenter of this presentation, Asha Rathod, Pallavi Parmar, Rahul Desai and Darshan Bag. We are presenting the introductory presentation of the novel Only Story by Julian Barnes. Let's start the presentation with about the author. About the author, Julian Barnes. He was born July 1946 at 79 and live in now England. His pen name is DoEng-MKBU for his crime fiction and occupation is he was a writer and alma mater was Magdalen College, Oxford. He wrote in genre about the novel, short stories, essays, and memories, literary moments, postmodernism. He is a renowned British writer celebrated for his intellectual and stylistic versatility. His work frequently explored the theme of history, memory, identity, and human relationships, often examine the complexity of the human experience with introspective depth and philosophical questioning. His distinctive postmodern style and English prose have genre critical acclaim and numerous prestigious awards. His notable works, Fables Parrot, written in 1984 about the postmodern novel, blend of fiction, biography, and literary criticism. Second is Arthur and George in 2005, a historical novel based on the real-life legal case involved Sir Arthur Conan. And The Sense of an Ending. Also, you get the Booker Prize-winning novel explore the memory and aging. Award and recognition. The Man Booker Prize for Sense of the Ending. The David Croghan Prize for Literature. George Faber Memorial Prize for Maternal Prix Femina. Julian Order Best Art and the Letters and Julian Prize. His writing is marked by the elegant prose, introspective depth, and philosophical questioning, making the only story a compelling examine of love, experiences, and the profound effect of the human psyche. The key fact of the novel, author Julian Barnes, published in the year 2018, genre literary fiction, psychological fiction, memory novel. Original language, English. Theme, love, memory, regret, loss, and aging. Narrative structure, shifting from the first person to second person to third person to reflect the protagonist emotional transformation. Setting, suburbs, England, spanning decade. Major character, Paul Roberts, the protagonist who recalled his youthful romance and its long-term consequences. Susan MacLeod, the married woman in her late 14th who engages in the relationship with Paul. Gordon MacLeod, Susan's abusive husband. John, Susan's friend, who served as the observer of this relationship. And the introduction of the novel. Julian Barnes' novel, The Only Story, 2018, is reflective and poignant narrative about the love, memory, and regret. The novel explores the relationship between the Paul, 19-year-old university student, and Suzanne, a married woman in her late 40s. Their unconventional love affair began during the summer tennis tournament in the English suburbs and involved into the deep, complex, and emotionally challenging journey. Barnes present the story in three distinct narrative styles: first person, second person, and third person. Mirroring, also shifting the perspective of love, memory, and self-reflection through theme of youthful passion, delusion, and lasting impact of love. The only story becomes the meditation on how relationships shape shape one's life and identity. And it's my learning outcome. Exploring the memory and reflection. The the memory of exploring the memory and reflection. The memory, sometimes we are talk about the memory always gonna hurt. It's like good or bad. Sometimes memory, when we are feeling like a present time, things okay, we are feel like happy and we are ending and forget that time and that feel like nostalgia. We are missing that thing, but that memory is present is okay, but in the future is always gonna hurt. Recognizing the impact of choice. That in the choice is the most important thing of the two option, because the past and present and future, the living in the present thing, we are choose in the right thing with connecting with the stories, in the relationship, someone not our experience, but I learn others experience with and think about that you are not to choose the right person with the right time, but you get more bad thing and regret in your future. Explore the theme of regret and loss. Also, I am talk about the choice, because you choose the wrong person or wrong thing in your life, or wrong decision, anything or wrong, or and you get after the you feel regret and loss. I am nothing about, I am not taking taking this thing, or I am not go there this place, but I choose myself oftenly. I go on that place, but when I'm that place and I feel okay, I feel feel like this is not a right decision for my life, but feel like regret and loss. And last is a collection and teamwork. Also, this presentation is learning outcome, because the teamwork and the collaboration and teamwork is sir also given like a task, this group presentation. We are the working in team and understanding the every people's how to work with each other and collaboration with this team. So thank you for my this is my side, and I will invite to Asha Rathod for narrative styles.
So, hello everyone, I'm Dil with the narrative patterns. As Dilip Badal's article, he mentioned something different narrative style as used by Julian Bars. So, classical structure versus postmodern technique. The novel follows a traditional three-part structure. Three-part structure. First is beginning, middle, and third is ending part. Like start with first narrative, then mixture of first and second narrative, and then second and third narrative style. Include postmodern element. This challenges conventional storytelling, and the classical framework gives the novel a familiar shape, but postmodern technique create ambiguity and invite readers to question truth and memory. So here, Julian Bass use postmodern techniques. Readers engage in these and feel real and relatable. And then narrative growth, shifting through time. Julian Bass use narrative growth first part he start begin with he was older Paul looking at his flashback his youth, he meets a girl in tennis club, his love with Susan, and how he shifted from past to present. Then These highlight how memory shape identity and showing that our understanding of past event and changes over time. Then another reliable narrator. Here the poll is a narrator as a unreliable narrative because we can't rely on them because we can add our memory and rewrite it. So it's raising the question that like can we trust our own memory? So these postmodern themes use that trust is not fixed but shaped by perspective and narrative drifted like shifting then first person, then second person, and then third person. In first part, he mentioned a boy meets a woman, and then second part at distance from Susan, like is how it become alcoholism, and third person shows emotional detachment of Paul's, like he can't lose him and regret that, and at the last he feels like that he is no longer reason for the alcoholism. Then philosophical reflection. So, Barnes, including deep reflection on love, suffering, and memory, that it is better to love deeply and suffer, or to avoid the love to prevent pain, or do we shape our own memory, or do they shape us? So it's reflected our on philosophical reflection that we can how we can engage in this story and can feel real or relative and personal. And then chronological tragedy, this like flashback and clear progression. So here are the Paul's jumps between past and present, like timeline. He start begin with he was when 19-year-old and meet Susan's, and how like Paul's journey and changes to grow to like this illusionment. Then here mentioning the theme of nostalgia, like how we look back at our own past and with find like how we remember our past and feel both like sorrow and joy also. So this is my learning outcome, like storytelling beyond structure, in novel like move between past and presenting, and how showing how memory shaped the story instead of fixing timeline. And then unreliable narration, we can trust on them that because Paul's emotion change how he remember his love story and making truth subjective, and shifting frustrating, that how narrative is shifting from first to second and third, that reflecting Paul's changing emotion and detachment, and memory as a narrative tool that here are the story unfold like a real memory, non-linear and fragment, highlight nostalgia and regret and loss. And it gives inspiration for writing, how we can engage reader to feel real or reflective. So this is from my side, and I would like to Pallavi for continuing this presentation.
Thank you, Asha and Kavita, for providing background of the novel. Now, let's move towards characters of the novel. We can find the central character is Paul Roberts, and another central character is Suzanne McLeod. And we can find the characters, her husband, Mr. Gordon McLeod, and their daughter, Susan McLeod, and Mr. Gordon McLeod's daughters, Martha and Clara. And we can find another characters like university friends of Paul, and his letter GF, and ex of Suzanne Gerald, and John, friend of Suzanne, and sister of Gerald. We can find the main characters Paul Roberts, who is the novel's main protagonist and narrator. We can find the story starts from his perspective as a first person narration, and we can find this narration shifting from first, second, and third. As a young man, he enters a passionate and unconventional love affair with an older woman, Suzanne McLeod. Over time, he reflects on the nature of love, memory, and the consequences of their relationship. We can find that throughout his life, how he has to suffer with memory and with his relationship with his lover, and we can find that the his adjustment with his family also. Another character is Suzanne McLeod, who is a charismatic and free-spirited woman in her 40s who falls in love with Paul. Initially full of life, she later struggles with emotional and psychological challenges, including alcoholism, and which strains their relationship. Like we can find that we can find here her three relationships: her past relationship with Gerald, present married relationship with his husband, Mr. McLeod, and his lover as a Paul. We can find three relationship, but she is not happy from any these three relationship. Eventually, we can find that the temporary happiness of a relationship. In the case of Paul, we can find that she is happy. In one state of her life, but after some time, as she grows older, in her old age, she started drifting from herself, and she's not able to adjust her life in a proper manner. Another character main we can find Mr. Gordon McLeod, who is Suzanne's husband, who she nicknames Elephant Pants. Suzanne's, we can find that he is more not that, but we can find that after this. He is abusive, but after came to know about this relationship with Paul, he became more abusive, and we can find him as a controlling husband who represent her who resents her affair with Paul. He represents societal constraint and the darker side of the marriage. That how the darker side of the marriage plays vital role in one character's life. Another characters are Martha and Clara McLeod. They are Suzanne's daughters who appear to be older than Paul. Paul affectionately refers to Martha as Miss G, means Miss Grumpy, and Clara as Miss NS, Miss Not So Grumpy. And even later on part, we can find that Martha takes responsibility of Suzanne. Another character is John. John is Gerald's sister and Suzanne's sister-in-law. She is independent and practical and somewhat controlling. She is. We can find that is confident, strong-willed, and naturally takes charge in relationships. Her casual authority and humorous banter reinforce her societal standing. She is practical and mindful of expenses, and shown in her interest in fuel costs. She is independent and resilient, never married, and cared for her family. She enjoys small pleasures like gin and cigarettes, but is careful with spending. She chooses dogs over humans as her love object after failure in love, and resistant to change and preferring comfort and to stay herself in comfort zone and control in her lifestyle. A well-rounded character combining authority, wit, and practicality. Other characters like Eric, who is Paul's best friend from university, we can find that who is beaten in the street, and from Paul's perspective, we can find that this incident that he is beaten in the on the street, and Paul fails to stand up for him and. Made at Susan's home, Cindy, Paul's ex-girlfriend, Uncle Hum, and Aunt Florence. Relatives, Susan visited. We can relatives of Susan, whom she visited as a child after death of her mother. Uncle. Sorry, Uncle Hump and Aunt Florence. We can find they are relatives of Susan, and after death of her mother, child Susan visited their home, and we can find that Uncle Humphrey is a minor character, but we can find that from the perspective of Susan, when Susan is telling her story to Paul, that how she is traumatized by his uncle who sexually abused her during her childhood and adolescence. Maurice, who worked with Reynolds News, and Dr. Canny, Susan psychiatrist, who helped her deal with her mental and health issues. We can now let's move towards plot overview. We can find that novel begins with 69 or 70 years old Paul Roberts, who recalls his first love story from his youth, and he takes us back to 50 years back, and we can find then memory. We are in his memory. The story is narrated in three parts, each shifting narrative style. In part one, we can find that first person narrative. We can have Paul's direct experience. In part two, we can find that shift in a first, some part of part two, we can find there is a first person, but gradually it shifts towards second person. We can find gradually detachment from his self and his relationship. In part three, we can find shift from second person to third person narrative, and complete detachment and reflection of his life. The novel opens with Samuel Johnson's definition of a novel: a small tale, generally of love. And we can find here in the starting the question arises, and that would you rather love the more and suffer the more, or love the less and suffer the less? That is, I think, finally the only real question. In part one, we can find that he tells his story of 50 years back when he is 19 years old university student. He returns his home for summer break, and he is seeking for adventure. And then he joins a local tennis club where he meets Susan McLeod. And we can find that his parents force him to join this tennis club for to seek any relation with any upper class girl, we can find. But we can find that when he meet this Susan McLeod, 48 years old married woman with two daughters. By chance, Paul and Susan are paired in a mixed doubles tennis match where their connection begins. Paul narrates his story, his personal emotions and thoughts, describing his excitement and rebellious nature. Their friendship, they first become friends, and their friendship turns romantic, and Paul begins driving Susan home daily. He used to visit Susan's home daily. And despite the judgment from society and family, Susan leaves her husband, Gordon MacLeod, for Paul. And Paul sees their love as a pure and liberating, believing that they can defy societal norms. Like we can find that he wrote one letter to their parents as in their town. The rumors about, and they are not in the favor of this the criticism they are facing from the people, so they decided to leave the place. So Paul wrote one letter to their parents, and he tells the story of him in clear cut manner. Then we shift towards part two, and we can find that narrative shift from first person to second person. And Paul and Susan moved to London, hoping to build a new life together. And they rented one home. And Paul started his studies in law, while Susan struggles with the personal trauma for her past marriages. As we can find that her husband is, they are not. In any manner, not mentally, not physically, they are not happy in their marriages. So she is suffering from her past. Their relationship begins to crack as Susan starts drinking excessively. Like she started her drinking habit, and it takes over herself. Like she is not able to control herself. And Paul initially narrates in we can find that in first person, and describing his growing frustration and helplessness. Like he is there to help her, but he tries to help her, but he cannot help her. So it the things which started to raise frustration within him. As Susan's condition worsens, the narrative shifts to second person, showing Paul's emotional detachment. We can find in this quote: "You try to help, you try to understand, but you don't know how. You think love should be enough, but it isn't." We can find that at first everything is goody goody sweetie sweetie thing in their relationship, and then we can find that rise of that arguments, secrecy, and emotional breakdowns it dominate the relationship. We can find that decline of Suzanne's health, and she lies, drinks a lot, and frequently loses her memory. While Paul struggles between love and frustration, as he wanted to pursue his career also, but he is. Yeah, he is. We can find that stuck there, and he is not able to decide. We can find at one moment that what he choose, love or career. So it led to him towards frustration. Eventually, Paul seeks escape, distancing himself from Suzanne, both emotionally and physically. And then we move towards part 3. The narrative, we can find that completely shifts. We can find from second person to third person, showing Paul's complete detachment from his past. We can find that Paul moves away, trying to rebuild his self, but he remains emotionally hollow. Like after Suzanne, he leaves Suzanne, and after he detached himself from Susan, but and he had many women in his life, but he is not able to connect himself, as he became hollow from inside. As depicted in the novel, he handed over Suzanne to his daughter Martha, and Martha takes responsibility of her mother, and Paul abandons law studies and lives in isolation, running a small cheese business in rural village. He avoids deep relationships, never fully recovering from his first love. Suzanne ages and develops dementia, completely losing her sense of self. Now she's not able to control herself anymore, and she is. We can find that. Now she is a burden, become burden on her surrounding people, and we have final scene. At that time we can have the glimpse that Paul attends Suzanne's funeral without emotion, and instead preoccupied with his car's empty petrol tank. And this symbolizes Paul's emotional emptiness. His greatest love story has left him numb and detached. So this is the story, and my learning outcome is, at first when I came across this story, so at first I thought that it was just a mere it was just a mere love story like other love stories, but later on I realized that it is not so. Like we can find that many philosophical aspects in that. We can find that how memory shaped the person's life, and there is many more things in the novel. Through the Paul's character, I understand that how our memory can be modified by our mind, by subconsciously or subconsciously or not. We can find that we can develop our memory according to our pleas, or we can find that to defend ourselves, that I take this action into reaction of this action. So we cannot fully rely on our or anyone's memory. What attracted me the most is the sports phenomena, which is provide space for the writer to move away from traditional love story meetings, as we find in traditional love stories that the two lovers meet at a mountain and beside the lake, and then so we can find that the first meeting at a sport complex, we can find it in tennis club. So it is very unique depiction. I also came to understand that life often requires us to adjust to our surroundings. Like we have to sometimes we have to become self-centered, but it doesn't help us to escape from our responsibilities. So we have to adjust ourselves, and with the surroundings, with the responsibilities. I see, like in the novels, we can find that two extreme ways of looking at life. So, what you choose in your life, it matters. Like one of being a captain of a ship, and another is to being a bump on a log. Like we can to choose the path. Like yes, I did this. this is my life, and to become pessimistic and drift towards life as life, like जैसा चल रहा है वैसे चलने दो, like ऐसा. So like to choose what to choose, we can find the clear cut two ways of our life. And what I like the most, that we can find through the shifting of the narration, but we can understand what is the psychological state of the characters, whether it is the psychological state of Paul, Susan, and any other character. We can fully develop the we can have assumption of their state of mind. So now for further discussion, I would like to call Rahul this side. Thank you.
Thank you for providing the background of this novel. Now let's discuss about the some major themes of this novel, like theme of love. Julian Barnes presents love as a transformating, complex, and yet painful force, shaping the life, shaping the personal life of the Paul and Susan. This Paul and 19 years old falls for Susan, who is older lady in this novel, married woman, also married woman, embracing the love as a liberation, defying the status of love and many other things, convert into the painfulness and the suffering of the emotional depth by the love. Their relationship also the shift from the idealistic passion to emotional dependency and suffering in the love by the personal life, personal status, personal growth of identity, and many more things. Susan's decline forces Paul to confront the limits of devotion and love's harsh realities. Also depict the harsh realities of the love in this novel. The only story, the novel depicts love as a both exhilarating and tragic. Love becomes tragic. As Sir earlier mentioned in introduction, the first love is like happiness, something top of the world feeling, out of the world feeling. But in this novel, Julian Barnes present love as a tragic love, and questioning its true worth. What is love? What is the feeling of love? And true worth of love. What is the true worth of love? Then second theme, like theme of memory. The only story explores the memory as a fluid, subjective, and central to shaping identity. Identity throughout the societal traditions, identity, and expressed from the self discovery and representative identity by the Paul and the Susan's identity. Julian Barnes present memory in three stages, like idealization, disillusionment, and detachment. Detachment with each other, like Paul and Susan's love. Paul's retrospective narration reveals how memory distorts and reshapes reality over time. As we earlier recently see, the narrative technique of this novel, first person narrative depicts to the second person narrative and then third person narrative. This kind of narrative highlights the memory shifting from the shifting from the emotional depth and fragmented reflection of memory. The novel highlights the memory's unreliability, showing how individuals reinterpret and romanticize the past. Memory also connected with the past experience of the Paul, experience of Paul, who represent the his story, narrative story, like the memory. Julian Barnes suggests the memory is not just a record, but a way of understanding and justifying life's choice. The third theme of marriage. The only story contrasts marriage as a social constraint with the idealism of love. Susan's unhappy marriage life highlights the duty over the passion, reinforcing societal conventions. Her husband, Gordon, Susan's husband, Gordon, represent the oppressive nature of traditionals. Susan's husband, Gordon, mostly believe in societal tradition and societal expectations rather than the self observation or self discovery. Loveless marriages. Susan's affair with Paul seeks escape, but Barnes questions whether love outside marriage brings happiness. The novel challenges the whether marriage prevents loneliness or merely fails to nurture true companionship. Then question of responsibility. Uh, in love or in relationship, the responsibility is the major part, the only story. This novel explores the responsibility in love, balancing the passion, duty, and power of sacrifice. Paul initially sees love as a defense, but later faces the burden of caring for Susan. As Susan struggles, deepen, Paul transitions from lover to caretaker, questioning his role. In this novel, we can find the questioning on own role by the Paul and Susan also. The novel asks the whether love is devotion or entrampment, blurring the selflessness and self-preservation. Burns portrayed responsibility as the both a moral obligation and an emotional weight that linger beyond the love. Then my learning outcome throughout the study of these themes, I also learn about the insight of the nature of love, memory, what is the role of marriage, and the first love, and after the what is the significance of first love and that feeling, and then societal expectation from us and our own experience, most major part in our societal tradition and society. Then the novel questions whether marriage provides true companionship or merely fulfillment or societal expectations. So this part is by me, and then now for further I would like to call Darshan Wag.
A very good afternoon, everyone. So, as a part of this presentation, I am dealing with the topic memory novel and how the only story is a memory novel. So, a memory novel is a type of a fiction that revolves around the recollections, personal or collective, often blending past and present through a subjective lens. These novels typically explore themes of identity, trauma, nostalgia, and the unreliability of memory. They may use fragmented narratives, non-linear storytellings, or a stream of consciousness techniques to reflect how memory functions. Some of examples of this kind of novels are In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust, Beloved by Toni Morrison, and The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes. So, as we see that any kind of story holds such kind of trauma. So what are those are trauma as a memory. So we can get to experience through the trauma that what are the characters are feeling, and by understanding the connection between memory and identity can help to establish such connections. And trauma is contradictory relationship with the past, and as we see historical narrative versus trauma as a memory. So we can take example as that if there are some events like 9/11 or 26/11, there are these events are historical tragedies, but if for us it is historical narratives. But if someone who is lost their loved ones in these tragedies will have a traumatic memory of this. So a historical narrative explains why an event happened and when it happened, and the explanation is possible only if the event is open to interpretation, and what cannot be explained becomes a marginal to history. Now, the only story by Julian Barnes as a memory novel. So, the novel explores how memory shapes the protagonist's identity over time. The narrative reflects Paul's changing perspectives of his relationship with Susan, and memory as a filter, distorting, reshaping the past. Uh, as we have unfolding the narratives, we get to see that memory plays a vital role of telling the story, and the narrative shifts between past and present, mirroring the fluid and subjective nature of memory. The Paul's reflection on love, loss, and regret reveals how emotion shapes past experiences, and events and emotions are revisited with the shifting meanings, highlighting the unreliability of memory. The passage of time alters recollections while past traumas continue to shape the present. Paul's interpretation of his past show how storytelling influence and distort truths, and the novel examines how memory can both preserve and distort the truth of past events. Uh, my learning outcomes from this is that I have understand how memories shape who we are and choices we make. I realize that memories aren't always accurate and can change over time. Now I'm able to see that how past trauma and emotions are linked to what we remember. And now I have a better understanding that how we create our own stories from pieces of memories. I understand how the past influences we think and act today. These all outcomes are very common, but we choose to ignore it. We all subconsciously know all these things, but through the reading and through the experiences, I've got to feel it. And on behalf of my whole group, I'm concluding this presentation. So, so to conclude, in the only story, Julian Barnes explores the complexities of love, memory, and the time through the relationship between Paul and Susan. The novel dwells into the complication of love, aging, and regret, showing how personal choices and shifting memories shape identity. Ultimately, it suggests that love and life are not defined by a single story, but by a series of experiences and reflections. These are the references, and thank you.
Hello, getting my voice? Hello, yeah, getting my voice? Okay, so I think the research paper is not done. The research paper work is remaining. Okay? Okay, but fine. The things which are presented is quite well presented. The novel is not very easy novel, but still you all have managed to get the crux of the novel. You have identified the main elements which are important to be kept in mind when we study such kind of novels. That also is taken very well. Keep the presentations in the digital board. I am coming in the class to discuss the things.